The alien queen wanted him dead, until he made her pregnant. The first thing Henry felt was cold. Not the natural cold of wind or snow, but the lifeless chill of metal. His cheek pressed against the floor, smooth and bitter with the taste of rust in the air. His wrists burned where the chains had dug into his skin. When he opened his eyes, the world above him shimmered with light that seemed too sharp, too alien. The air carried the sting of ozone, thick and heavy, as if the room itself had been breathing lightning. His head throbbed with every beat of his heart. The last memory he had was his ship under fire, the cockpit tearing apart with sparks and alarms, and then the black silence of unconsciousness. Now he was awake, chained, and surrounded. Voices echoed around him, deep and strange, carrying a rhythm he could not understand. When his eyes adjusted, he saw them, towering Xerathi soldiers, their armor black and edged with glowing veins of blue. Each held a spear with blades that shimmered as if carved from crystal fire. Their eyes were cold, unblinking, like hunters watching prey that was already caught. The chains jerked suddenly, dragging Henry to his feet. He stumbled forward, every step forced by the alien guards. The hall opened before him, vast and endless, lined with columns of crystal that pulsed with light. The walls themselves seemed alive, humming softly as if the palace itself was a living creature. At the far end of the hall, upon a throne carved from black stone and glowing veins of gold, sat Queen Xelyra. She was unlike anything Henry had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a golden hue, smooth and flawless, as though the light bent itself to worship her. Her eyes were sharp, elongated, burning with the cold focus of a predator. Her long crown of living metal curved backward, pulsing faintly as if connected to her very heartbeat. She was beauty and danger woven together, grace standing atop a mountain of blood. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but it carried venom beneath every syllable. "Human," she said, the word twisting like an insult. "You carry the stench of war. Your people attacked my colonies. Thousands of Xerathi are dead. You stand before me as a criminal." Her words cut through him, but Henry forced his back straight. He had been a soldier long enough to know when death was near. His voice, rough and broken, escaped his throat. "Do what you are going to do." A cold smile touched her lips. She lifted her hand, a gesture of finality. The guards tightened their grips, ready to end him right there on the shimmering floor. But then the hall shifted. A new voice rose, old and steady, carrying more weight than the guards' spears or the queen's authority. From the shadows, an elder Xerathi stepped forward. His frame was bent with age, his robes etched with runes that glowed faintly as if whispers of stars had been woven into them. His eyes were pale and endless, as though they had seen too many wars. "Wait," the seer said, his voice echoing like thunder trapped in stone. "This human is not to die. He carries something rare, something we have not seen in centuries. The key to what you have sought, my queen." The hall fell silent. Even the humming walls seemed to pause. Xelyra's gaze narrowed. "Speak plainly, old one." The seer's staff struck the floor once, sending a low vibration through the chamber. "The human carries the genetic spark that our people cannot produce. He is the answer. He can give you what no Xerathi male has given in generations. An heir." The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The guards shifted uneasily, their blades trembling faintly. Henry felt the weight of every eye on him, piercing him as if they could already see the child that did not yet exist. Xelyra's face hardened, her golden glow dimming into shadow. For the first time, Henry saw something in her expression that was not hatred, but conflict. She did not want this. She did not want him. But her people's future stood on the edge of a blade, and even a queen could not ignore the pull of survival. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She lowered her hand. "Spare him," she said coldly, "but chain him, lock him deep within the palace. If he resists, break him. If he tries to flee, kill him. He lives only because our empire demands it." The guards dragged Henry away. The throne room faded behind him, but her eyes remained in his mind. Eyes filled with hatred, but also something heavier. Something that told him his fate had just been bound to hers, whether either of them wanted it or not. The chamber they threw Henry into was not a prison cell in the way humans understood it. It was more like a gilded cage. The walls pulsed with faint light, alive with veins of crystal that shifted as if they were breathing. The bed was made of woven fibers softer than silk, and a table stood ready with food that shimmered in unnatural colors. Yet the doors were sealed, guarded day and night by armored Xerathi who never blinked. Henry sat on the edge of the bed, his wrists raw from chains, his mind still reeling. He had survived execution only to become something worse, property. A tool. A living key to a future he did not understand. Days passed in silence. The guards spoke little, and when they did, it was in the guttural rhythm of their language. Henry refused the food at first, eating only when his body could not fight hunger anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the queen's voice, the venom in her words, and the strange despair that had hidden behind her anger. On the fourth day, the door opened. She entered without announcement, and the guards stepped aside as if the air itself bent to her will. Queen Xelyra moved with the kind of grace that came from generations of command. Her golden skin shimmered beneath a long robe of obsidian fabric, edged with faint lines of light. She stopped a few steps away, her eyes cutting into him like blades. Henry stood, his fists clenched. "So you decided I should live," he said. His voice was rough, but steady. "You live," she answered coldly, "because I allow it." Her words struck like ice, but she did not stop there. Her gaze hardened, and for a moment her voice carried something heavier than pride, desperation. "You know why you are here. My people are dying. We have fought too long, burned too much. The war has left our bloodline broken. The seer believes you can give what no Xerathi can. An heir. A future." Henry let out a short, bitter laugh. "So that is it. You drag me across the stars, chain me like an animal, and now you expect me to save your entire empire." Xelyra did not flinch. She took a single step closer, and the air seemed to tremble around her. "Do not mistake this for choice, human. I do not want you. I do not trust you. But I need you." Silence stretched between them, thick and sharp. Henry met her eyes, searching for weakness, but what he found was not weakness at all. It was a weight, an invisible crown pressing down on her shoulders. She was not simply a ruler. She was a prisoner of her duty, just as much as he was chained by her guards. "Tell me," Henry said slowly, "what does it feel like to carry the burden of an entire people on your back? To know that without you, they all fall?" Her lips parted as if to strike him with words, but none came. For the first time, her golden glow dimmed, and Henry saw her not as a tyrant, but as a woman crushed by expectation. The tension between them became its own kind of war. Their conversations turned into duels, her mocking the fragility of humans, him mocking her pride. Each exchange left sparks in the air, sharp and cutting, but beneath the barbs grew something unexpected, a recognition, a fragile respect. At night, Henry would sit by the crystalline wall, staring at the shifting light. He thought about the friends he had lost, the war that had scattered humanity across stars, and the emptiness inside him. She, too, sat in her throne above a crumbling empire, her people looking at her not with love, but with desperate expectation. They were enemies. They were strangers. Yet somehow, in their silence, they began to understand each other. The day of the ritual came sooner than Henry expected. He had no chains now, though the guards still stood outside his chamber with unshaken vigilance. He had spoken with Xelyra enough times to understand her reasons, but that did not make the weight of it any lighter. When the summons came, 2 armored Xerathi entered and motioned for him to follow. The palace seemed quieter than usual, its humming walls muted as though the structure itself knew what was about to happen. They led him into a chamber unlike any other he had seen. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft light, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. In the center was a raised platform, surrounded by patterns carved deep into the floor, symbols that seemed to twist and shift when he looked at them too long. Xelyra was already there. She stood tall, draped in ceremonial armor of black and gold. A crown of living metal extended across her brow, its points flickering faintly with energy. She looked every part the queen, but beneath the strength Henry saw a flicker of something else. Fear. Not of him, but of failure. The seer stood at the edge of the chamber, his staff resting against the crystal floor. His pale eyes watched Henry with a mixture of reverence and caution. "The ritual is simple," the seer said, his voice echoing. "Two bloodlines, bound by ancient code. The union will decide the fate of our people." Henry stepped onto the platform, his breath heavy. His instinct screamed against it, to fight, to resist, to defy. But somewhere inside him, a different voice rose. A voice that remembered the endless war, the meaningless deaths, the nights staring into the stars wondering if humanity had any purpose left. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was his chance to change something larger than himself. He looked at Xelyra. She did not flinch. The ritual began. Light filled the chamber, rising from the symbols etched into the floor. The glow wrapped around Henry and Xelyra both, binding them in a web of energy that hummed with ancient power. He felt his blood surge, his body alive with heat, as if the universe itself was reaching into his veins. Xelyra's eyes locked on his, and for the first time her expression softened. The venom was gone. There was only resolve, and something unspoken between them. When it ended, the chamber fell silent. The light dimmed, leaving only the soft hum of the crystal walls. Henry staggered, his chest rising and falling as though he had just fought a battle. Xelyra stood firm, but her hand trembled slightly at her side. The seer lowered his staff. "It is done. The seed of new life has been placed. Now we wait." Henry returned to his chamber with his thoughts tangled. He told himself it was only survival. He told himself it was only duty. But deep down he knew something had shifted. Weeks passed. The palace whispered. The guards who once looked at him with disgust now avoided his eyes, uncertain how to treat the human whose fate was tied to their queen. The silence broke one morning when shouts echoed through the halls. The news spread like fire. The queen was with child. For the first time in decades, there would be an heir to the Xerathi throne. The empire shook. Some celebrated openly, filling the plazas with glowing banners and chants of renewal. Others spat in anger, calling it a disgrace, a corruption of their blood. The council chambers burned with arguments, voices rising until the walls themselves trembled. Henry felt the weight of it all press against him. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was no longer just a soldier. He was something far more dangerous. He was hope to some and an abomination to others. And in the shadows of the palace, hatred stirred. The first attempt on Henry's life came at night. He woke to the sound of something soft, the faint hiss of air, the scrape of metal against stone. For a moment he thought it was only a dream, until the glow of the crystalline wall flickered. A shadow moved, sliding across the room like liquid darkness. Henry sat up just as the assassin struck. The figure lunged from the gloom, cloaked in black armor that absorbed the light around it. In its hand gleamed a blade of energy, humming low with deadly promise. Henry rolled from the bed, the strike cutting clean through the sheets where he had been lying. His heart pounded, but training took over. He grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a chair carved from alien crystal. As the assassin slashed again, Henry swung the chair with all his strength. It shattered against the armored figure, splinters scattering across the floor. The blow was enough to stagger the intruder, but not stop him. The assassin hissed in the Xerathi tongue, its voice filled with hatred. The blade rose once more. The door burst open. Xelyra stormed into the chamber, her golden armor glowing in the dim light, a blade already in her hand. The assassin turned, but too slow. She moved like lightning, her weapon cutting through the dark figure with precision born of centuries of war. The body fell, armor cracking apart as it hit the floor. The room went silent. Henry stood there, chest heaving, the splintered remains of the chair still in his hand. Xelyra looked at him, her eyes sharp but no longer filled with disdain. They stood in silence, the bodies of her dead assassin bleeding across the crystal floor. Then another figure leapt from the shadows. A second assassin, this one larger, armored in crimson plates. Its blade arced toward Henry's chest, too fast for him to block. But Xelyra was faster. She stepped between them, her weapon flashing. Sparks filled the chamber as blade met blade. With a final cry, she drove her weapon deep into the assassin's chest. The crimson armor split open, the figure collapsing at her feet. The queen stood over the corpse, her golden skin spattered with dark blood. Her breath was heavy, but her stance was unbroken. She turned to Henry, and for the first time her voice was not cold, but fierce with something else. "They will not have you," she said. Henry lowered the chair slowly, his hands shaking. He met her gaze, and in that moment, something shifted between them. She was no longer just his captor, and he was no longer only her prisoner. They had fought together, survived together, and something deeper had been forged in the fire of survival. After that night, Xelyra stayed close to him. At first, she claimed it was protection, nothing more. But the long nights told a different story. They began to talk, not as queen and captive, but as two souls who had lost too much. Henry told her of the war, of friends who never came back, of nights staring at empty skies. She told him of the burden of the crown, of ruling a people who demanded everything but gave nothing in return. Their words were sharp at first, edged with the pride of two enemies. But slowly, the sharpness dulled. Conversations became longer, softer. They shared things they had never told anyone else. One night, as they sat by the balcony that overlooked the glowing city, Henry noticed how the light of the twin moons reflected against her golden skin. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like a woman who carried a weight too heavy for anyone. And for the first time since his capture, Henry felt something he had not known in years. Belonging. The whispers of rebellion had been growing for weeks. Henry had seen it in the way the guards looked at him, in the hushed tones that died the moment he entered a room. The council was not silent either. Rumors passed through the palace like venom, that the queen had betrayed her people, that the unborn heir was an abomination, that the throne itself was tainted by human blood. The night of the coup came without warning. The first explosion shook the palace like a roar from the gods. Crystals lining the hall shattered, filling the air with shards of light. Sirens wailed, their haunting cry echoing through the endless corridors. The guards outside Henry's chamber rushed into formation, shouting in the Xerathi tongue as the walls trembled again. Xelyra burst into his chamber, her golden armor gleaming with urgency. "They come for us," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Henry grabbed the blade she had given him days before, a curved weapon of crystal and steel. He nodded without hesitation. "Then let us make them regret it." The halls became rivers of fire and blood. Elite soldiers of the council stormed the palace in crimson armor, their weapons spitting bolts of energy that scorched the walls. Loyal guards of the queen fought back with bladed spears, their cries of loyalty ringing against the rebellion's shouts of hate. Henry fought beside Xelyra, his military instincts snapping into place. He moved through the chaos like a man reborn, striking with precision, cutting down enemies twice his size. For the first time since his capture, he felt like a soldier again. But this time, he was not fighting for humanity. He was fighting for her. The battle raged deep into the heart of the palace. Smoke and fire filled the corridors, and the walls bled light where the crystals cracked. Henry and Xelyra pushed forward together, cutting a path through the storm until they reached the council chamber itself. There, waiting among the wreckage, stood the leader of the coup. He was a towering Xerathi, draped in crimson robes over armor plated with jagged metal. For massive arms extended from his body, each holding a weapon crackling with energy. His eyes burned with pure hatred as they fixed on Henry. "You stain our throne with your filth, human," the council leader roared. "Your blood will end this madness, and the queen with it." Henry raised his blade. His heart pounded, his body already bruised and cut from the fight, but he did not retreat. "You will have to kill me first," he said. The duel began. The council leader moved like a storm, his 4 blades striking in relentless rhythm. Henry blocked and dodged, every strike rattling through his bones. He was fast, but not fast enough. The enemy's power was overwhelming, each blow threatening to tear him apart. One strike cut deep across his arm. Another smashed against his ribs, sending him sprawling to the ground. His blade slipped from his fingers, clattering across the floor. The council leader loomed above him, raising all 4 weapons for the final strike. Henry gasped for breath, his vision swimming. He knew he could not stop it, but Xelyra could. With a cry that shook the chamber, she launched herself at the rebel. Her blade flashed like lightning, striking with all the fury of a queen who refused to bow. She drove her weapon deep into his chest, piercing through the armor, through the heart that beat with hate. The council leader froze, his eyes wide with shock. Then he collapsed, his massive form crashing to the floor with a sound that echoed through the burning palace. Silence followed. The battle outside faded as word spread. The coup was broken. The leader was dead. The queen still stood. Xelyra stood above the corpse, her golden armor shattered and her blade dripping with blood. She turned to Henry, who struggled to rise from the floor. She reached out her hand, pulling him to his feet. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that silence, everything was clear. They had survived. Together, the surviving council members were dragged into the chamber, their faces pale with fear. Xelyra raised her blade, her voice ringing like iron. "Hear me. The human you hate is no prisoner. He is my consort, protector of the throne, father of the heir who will rule after me. Any who defy this will share the fate of your traitorous leader." No one spoke. No one dared. The palace still smoldered from the battle. Crystals cracked along the walls, casting fractured light across the grand halls. The scent of ash and blood lingered in the air. But amid the ruin, the throne still stood. And upon it, so did Queen Xelyra. Henry remained by her side, his body bruised and aching from the fight. Yet he stood tall, the weight of exhaustion balanced by something greater, a sense of belonging he had not felt in years. The coup was broken, the council silenced. The empire, though scarred, still breathed. The surviving council members bent their heads in reluctant obedience as Xelyra rose to her full height. Her voice carried through the chamber like thunder rolling across the stars. "Let it be known," she declared, "that this human is no longer prisoner, no longer outsider. He is my consort, my protector, and the father of the heir who will carry our bloodline into the future. Any who challenge this will meet the same fate as those who betrayed me tonight." No voice dared rise against her. The rebellion had been crushed, and the image of their queen, standing blood-stained but unbroken beside the human who had fought at her side, burned itself into the minds of all present. Days turned to weeks. The palace rebuilt itself, the living crystals stitching cracks back into place as if healing wounds of flesh. The city below glowed brighter than ever, banners of gold and silver raised in the streets. Songs of renewal echoed, though some still whispered in secret of corruption and shame. Henry did not care for the whispers anymore. He had stopped being a prisoner the night he and Xelyra fought side by side. What bound him to this world now was not chains, but choice. He had chosen her, just as she had chosen him. The final dawn of the story rose quietly, without fire or blood. The war-torn horizon glowed with soft light as the twin suns breached the skyline. Henry stood on the balcony of the palace, the wind carrying the scent of alien blossoms from the gardens below. Xelyra stood beside him, her hand resting gently over her stomach where the future heir grew. For a long time they said nothing. Words were no longer needed. The silence between them spoke more than any vow. Henry looked at her, at the woman who had once wanted him dead but now stood as his partner. For the first time in his life, he felt the war inside him grow quiet. No chains, no battlefield, no exile, just peace. And in that peace, he knew he had finally found something worth living for.